and welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. We may cover all three this morning. We always try to start Viewpoint with a kudo or two, so we make two kudos. We have the ladies basketball railers, who are in their sectional championship finals, and our men's basketball team, we're playing in the regional finals. Let's wish them all well. We have a remarkable young lady here, the Frobe girl, who is smashing all records every time she steps on the court, and that's a neat thing to know. So support the Railers. Where are they playing, Mr. Ash?
They play this coming Thursday in Rochester. They will play against Rochester for the sectional championship. That's at 7 o'clock Thursday night.
Well, that's not that far.
No, it is not.
I'll meet you in Broadway and buy a drink, and so. So seriously, if you see any of these young ladies out and about, give them a congratulatory comment. By the way, I just along in that vein, I wear that honor hat, honor flight hat, and I think I've mentioned this before, and it's okay if I mention it again. The gentleman at CVS came up to me the other day. I was wearing that hat, and he says, "I want to thank you for your service," which is a nice thing, and all of us, we appreciate that very much. As I started to pay for Bill, he wanted to pay for the bill. So, I said, "Your name must be, what's that fellow's name that impresses everybody?"
Gossett?
Cut his mic off. Oh no, it was. Oh well, I'll get back in the middle of my conversation in a minute. Let's get down to some serious business here. We've got a man who's given up his time this morning to talk to us about some important duties that are performed in this community. The office of Coroner, Don Peasley, who fills that office very, very nicely, very professionally, which is really more important. And the first question I'll ask is, how long has the office of Coroner been established, Mr. Peasley? Boy, it goes back a long time.
That goes back a long time. I really couldn't give you that answer on how many years.
Well, yeah. Well, I said off air before I was sitting around here talking in the green room. In the old days, the innocent days, it would be that the funeral directors would kind of pass that office of Coroner around, and nobody said a thing. Everybody was okay with that. Kerrigan would have it this year, and Golf Funeral Home would have it the next year, and then Holland and Bear would have it after that. Perfectly honest, nothing wrong with that. But to put some order in it, let's just start out with the official duties of the coroner. How do you serve our community, Mr. Peasley?
The coroner is the person in charge of going out and pronouncing a person deceased, doing the investigation, and determining whether or not an autopsy is needed. If the person is under a medical supervision of a doctor, physician that would give a cause of death, we don't always have to do an autopsy. If we have a young person that dies not under medical direction, then we automatically order an autopsy. If we have a suspected homicide, suicide, car accident, that kind of thing, we always do an autopsy on those.
Off air, we were talking about autopsies at the medical examiners, and you mentioned the dearth of medical examiners. I think there are three available to Logan County.
Yeah, there's three available to Logan County. We have Dr. Denton up in McLean County. Then we have Dr. Patterson in Springfield, and we have Dr. Yeomans in Peoria. And we do all of our autopsies, if available, at the McLean County Coroner's Office with Dr. Denton.
Mm-hmm. Now, an autopsy is required when there's an unknown cause for death?
Yes.
Is that the way to put that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Have you had any unusual in your career, sir?
Not last 2.5 years, no.
Yeah.
Yet.
Tell us about the term for current coroner here in Logan County. The length of the term.
The term is for 4 years. you run for election, which I ran in the primary of 2020, and then was elected in the November general election. And so I took office December 1st of 2020 during the COVID. So then I'll be running for re-election here in 2023, 2024, in the 24 election.
Now, your day-to-day job is owner and director of Peasley Funeral Homes. So isn't it that the coroner requires 7 days a week? Although there's a possibility of that happening.
There's coroners is on call 24/7, 365 days a year. I have staff that's available to cover for me if I need to go out on that call. I also have 2 deputies. I have a chief deputy and then another young lady that works for us also that are sworn deputy coroners, and they're capable of handling if I'm not available.
That's good because you're not tied down that way. You
No.
take a vacation in Burtonview at least and get away a while. Or you could go to Broadwell or Beast and one of the
Yeah.
3 Bs.
Yep.
Go ahead, Lloyd.
So you mentioned one of the duties of the coroner is the determining the cause of death. That may not seem like it's a big deal, but in terms of like insurance and things like that, it definitely has some
Yes.
major implications.
Yes. We have to determine whether it's natural, homicide, suicide, undetermined. Those are the 4 main. But then we got to determine whether there's a shooting victim or overdose, which unfortunately we're seeing an increase of in the whole Illinois.
Have you experienced any here in Logan County as a result of the drug problem?
Yes.
That's a sad answer, and it's a direct answer, but it's really a sad answer. 1 or 2 is enough, and I'm sure you must have quite a bit more than that.
Yeah, we're probably seeing 20 overdoses a year.
Go right ahead, sir. Yeah, you're shocked, and so am I.
Yeah, that's a much larger number than I thought it would be. So as far as the coroner duties, I grew up, in the 70s watching Quincy, and I know he was a medical examiner. What are the differences as far as what a coroner does and a medical examiner does?
The coroner goes out, pronounces a person deceased, and then transports the body to the place of autopsy, which Quincy was a TV show.
Right. So you don't solve crimes or anything like that?
No, we leave that to the police department, Illinois State Police, CSI teams. We assist with them and call them in when needed.
So the medical examiner then, once the coroner takes the body where it goes, that's
The
generally
pathologist does the autopsy, yes.
Okay.
And if there's any regarding suspicious deaths or perhaps criminal involvement, that's when you get to the authorities right away.
That's when the police department is always
sheriff in that department,
county or city.
or the city.
They're always on scene with us. And then another thing we do, if the family not been notified, we have to notify the family of the death also.
So are there certain requirements as far as if one aspires to be a coroner? Are there certain education requirements or certifications? Or
You could be the coroner.
oh well, you don't want that.
There's we're required to go to a 40-hour training class, in a week-long training class, and they have that usually in Decatur or different cities, Mount Vernon, Effingham, or Chicago area. And then we have to have 21 hours of continuing education every year to keep us up to date.
You get right down to brass tacks, as the old saying goes. That doesn't sound like a heck of a lot to qualify. And yet, I'm sure the exams are very stringent, but it just seems to me, Lloyd, that that's not a very heavy requirement.
Right, but I'm sure you need to have a pretty wealth of background knowledge going into those classes.
It helps.
They're going to talk about medical things.
But you've got all your contacts to use. You've got your forensic pathologist. You've got your CSI from the state police. You've got your detectives with the local police department. But basically, we use a lot. We rely a lot on the state police for major crimes.
Now, Don, to become a funeral director requires an obvious license. And are there exams to have to take to become a funeral director, or show certification of a school like
You have to have basically an associate's degree to begin mortuary college, and then once you pass a national board, you have to do 24 hours every 2 years in the state of Illinois to keep your license.
That's not a whole lot, 24 hours.
It doesn't seem like it, but when you're trying to work it in where you're working full time, it's hard.
The business. Have you, since you've been a licensed funeral director, have you seen a change much in people's attitudes toward funerals and how they want them conducted? Or let's also go to cremation.
And we're seeing a higher cause for cremations. Just different change in the society today. Less religious background for a lot of the families. A lot of people don't have life insurance anymore for one reason or another. And the cost of, you can't buy a car today for what you did 30 or 40 years ago. Funerals also have to go up in price.
Yeah. I suspect the cost of a casket has increased phenomenally.
Mm-hmm. They have.
Now, when you were just a kid running around here, we used to have Dolly's Casket Country on the south end of, or the east end of 3rd Street there,
mm-hmm. Yep.
which is now our Logan County Health Department, where they do a fine job, a whale of a job out there. But that was a big time. Lincoln, I think it was Lincoln Casket,
mm-hmm.
I believe.
Yep, that was the name.
I set one aside many years back, so.
Okay.
I think it was about a 1/4-inch plywood.
whatever does the job. But that is an option. Are people taking more advantage of that or less advantage of that as far as like pre-planning?
Yes. Yeah, they do. There's a lot more pre-planning. And it helps the family out.
Yeah. Mr. Peasley, let's just discuss pre-planning, because not only is that really an important issue for you, a funeral director, whomever it may be, but the real benefactors there are the family of the deceased. Things are all taken care of. It's pretty much cut and dry. Mm-hmm. So let's discuss that procedure, sir.
Well, the family comes in and the individual comes in. We sit down and discuss what they want for a funeral, and then they pick out their casket and vault. If they want a funeral home service, graveside service, church service, and then we document all that, and then they prepay that. And when they prepay it, it locks it in to make it irrevocable, so that if they end up in the nursing home on public aid, that the state can't come back and get that money. Mm-hmm. So they get the funeral that they wanted.
Well, it's certainly an easy out for the family. Mm-hmm. If somebody is, and they don't even have to be really ill. It just makes good sense for somebody 50 years old who's in good health to go ahead and make that preparation.
Mm-hmm. It is, because that way the kids don't have to worry about it. Plus, if they end up in the nursing home with public aid, the state will make them get rid of their life insurance unless they do a collateral assignment.
What about in the case of an unknown deceased? How do you go about identifying a deceased body that was found somewhere?
Well, hopefully they'll have identification on them, or we have had to do dental records. Fortunately, we were able to find the family knew where the person had dental records at, and we identified one person with that. We identified one person with state came in and did fingerprints for us. And of course, everything's electronic nowadays, so they had it within a matter of minutes because the person had apparently had a record and was in the system.
So what is it that sort of inspired you to step into the office of coroner?
It's just something I've always wanted to do. Growing up, I've been an EMT with Atlanta Rescue for 22 years. I've been a funeral director for over 30, and it just seemed like the next step would be county coroner.
Mr. Peasley's a lot older than I thought he was. And I mean that kindly. I mean it with respect. He said he'd been a funeral director for over 30 years. I find that staggering.
I went to mortuary college in 1991, so I've been licensed with the state of Illinois since 1993.
Okay. Getting into the office of coroner, then, was there anything that maybe you thought you would encounter that you didn't encounter, or maybe anything about the office that was sort of a surprise to you that you didn't expect, or have things pretty much been what you
everything's pretty much
anticipated?
what I expected. Like you growing up watching Quincy, not quite that elaborate, but we don't have the budget that they have.
Right.
But
If somebody, what happens in this case? Somebody's out walking in the woods and they find a body. And of course, the first thing they do is identify authorities.
Yes.
And then what? From that point on, what takes place, Don?
well, the police department would go on scene, secure the scene. They would call me. We would go out to the scene, do both investigation, call in the CSI, if depending on the situation. We'd call in the state police CSI team, and then we would take the person for autopsy, make notification to the family if they're not already on scene. And today, with today's technology, and I know everybody loves Facebook, Facebook is my worst nightmare.
It is.
Because people put things on Facebook that shouldn't be there until family is notified.
Oh, sure. 648-5510. Make yourself a note to make a question, write it down, and call Mr. Peasley. There's an opportunity to be better informed about something that we all kind of lurks back in the shadows, and we don't think much about it. 648-5510, and we'll now take a break for our commercials. Go right ahead, Mr. Ash. Thanks to our advertisers, our automobile dealers in the community. We come right back in the studios, WLC, and our guest this morning, fine gentleman, been around with us a while. I was amazed to find out how long he's been in the funeral business. Peasley Funeral Homes Director, Mr. Don Peasley, does a great job for families. And this morning we're talking about his duties of serving the community as Logan County Coroner. Mr. Peasley, I have some questions off the internet here. Pretty dumb question, but it starts. It says, what is the role of coroner, for God's sake?
Well, the coroner is the person that is notified when someone is found deceased. We're notified by Logan County Dispatch to go to a scene to determine whether the person passed away from natural causes, homicide, suicide, or undetermined. We're the ones that determine whether there's an autopsy needed, whether the person's under medical direction. We also get those medical records from the doctors for the pathologist. And then we also make notification to the family, which is easier these days with Facebook and the internet than what it would have been years ago.
Second question here on this is Google question. This is not Bill's or Lloyd's. Kind of a stupid question, but anyway, it says, do coroners do autopsies? Well, I suppose in some areas in the state, that's a very important question.
In some areas they might, but we do not. We have a forensic pathologist that we use up in Bloomington, McLean County Coroner's Office. He's one of 500 forensic pathologists in the nation. So I attend the autopsies. I do the transports to the autopsy, but I do not do the autopsy. Mm-hmm. We get the results when the pathologist is done.
That's a stupid question, Lloyd. I can answer part of this. What do coroners do daily? Well, he goes to guest house and maybe once in a while to old Joe's.
We've got paperwork. Not only do we get notified on deaths that we have to investigate, but we get notified of all hospital deaths and hospice home deaths where patients are under hospice. We don't have to go to the scene, but because they have a nurse that is on scene that pronounces them, and they relay the information to us, and then we decide yes or no whether to go ahead and release to the funeral homes or not.
Did the advent of COVID, Mr. Peasley, increase your workload at all? Excuse me, please.
It did funeral home-wise. Coroner-wise, no. I would say because of Lincoln Hospital not being a major medical facility anymore, most of their patients were down in Springfield or other hospitals. I mean, they did have some COVID patients there in the past, but not near like the other hospitals did.
How about the ordering of caskets? Of course, normally, am I correct in saying this? Normal course of events, I die and my family picks out my casket, and you have to order it according to. Place down in Arkansas, Batesville, I think that was where they made caskets. Is that still a big operation down there?
That company has been sold. I'm not sure who actually owns it now, but they still make caskets. We have other companies around. There's several different companies over in Indiana that do make caskets near Batesville. Mm-hmm.
And are there companies that specialize in making urns for cremation?
Yes, your casket companies do, and there are several companies that make urns.
I want him to get a special Air Force urn for me. I think I found one. It was visitation for Marvin Boss Sr. or Jr. I'm sorry, and had an Air Force urn. And I thought that was pretty neat. So I said, Peasley's got to get one of those for me. He'll disguise it in an old coffee can.
Whatever works.
Go ahead.
You mentioned that as far as a coroner goes, there aren't particular educational requirements or certifications that you have, the trainings that you do. If someone was interested, in becoming a coroner, even though there aren't particular educational requirements, are there certain things that they should study or certain classes they should take in school that would kind of lead them, better prepare them down that path?
Anatomy and that kind of thing. Like for me, I was an emergency medical technician for 22 years, so that has helped me through this and through becoming a funeral director. just those kind of classes.
Biology and health
Biology,
sciences
yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Jim, I can name any of them, a bunch of kids that I used to know in my youth that studied anatomy.
in the backseat of a car or the balcony at the movies, maybe?
Go right ahead, boy. Smart aleck kid here.
Gosh, I don't know. We're waiting on callers is what we're waiting on.
648-5510. Listen, folks, Mr. Peasley, and I want to be serious about this. Mr. Peasley offers a great service to you folks out there, not only as your funeral director, but as our county coroner. Important duties, day in and day out. Maybe not that important, but once in a while a big event will happen, and his plate is really full. So let's show a lot of respect for Don Peasley, and 648-5510. Give him a call if you have any questions at all. He might even give you a discount for the next 3 minutes.
Something else that we do too, along with our duties, is if there's a death out of state and the coroner there or medical examiner needs someone locally notified, we do go make notification to families here if needed. That's not one of our investigations, but one of theirs. And we've had to do that. We've had to call other counties to have their coroners do the same thing.
I would imagine that's never a fun task.
No.
Mr. Peasley, you have made an observation earlier this morning that religion played a factor in the funeral services of today, indicating, of course, that religion may not be as important, generally speaking, as it has been. Am I correct in accepting your observation that way?
Yes. Yeah, we're seeing more and more families that come in and say, Mom wasn't religious, or Mom didn't have a minister. Can you find us somebody?
That's sad.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean it in that context of that word. That's sad. People should have that rock to hold on to.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll give that some minister for a subject for his next presentation.
Oh, I thought maybe you were going to get ordained or something.
Too smart for that.
So then, in such a case, is there? How do you go about? Do you have like a certain?
I've got contacts. I've been in Lincoln 20 years with a funeral home, and so I've got contacts through all the churches, and it's usually not a problem finding somebody that can do the service.
And then, as far as funeral services go, going to your funeral director hat, have there been any? What do I want to say? Unusual types of funerals where maybe different kind of music or anything that maybe isn't what we would think of as a customary type of funeral that you've encountered or had to arrange?
No, not really. Basically, in the church, we'd follow what the minister wants for music. At the funeral home, we'll kind of play whatever they want. But when you're in church, you play what's allowed there.
I kind of solved that issue with my minister. We discussed my services, and I wanted jazz music. And his back went up like a camel's. And after all, and I understood why. I'm serious. I'm being serious now. He didn't want to deduct from the dignity of the service with having jazz music. And I understood that. So we reached a compromise. We're going to play jazz music instead of an organ prelude. So you can come swinging in and swinging out.
Well, whatever it takes. So, gosh, I'm trying to think. In terms of your funeral director position, we talked about how there's, with not as much emphasis on religion in homes today, that has sort of impacted the services and the arrangements and things like that. Is there anything? How do I want to phrase this? How has it impacted that in terms of the arrangements? Are they maybe less religious and more informal, or?
Yeah, they're less religious and more having celebration of lives, like at the American Legion or Knights of Columbus or different buildings, instead of having a minister. Sometimes the minister will come in and have a prayer to start the service, and other people get up and speak. It's a different world.
Different strokes for different folks. And I remember very vividly, several years now, I went to a funeral for old George, and they played country music in the funeral home, Peasley funeral homes in Atlanta.
Yep.
And took old George out and put him in the back of a pickup truck and hauled him off, and that was that. And I thought, what a sad thing.
Yep. But you got to do what the family wants.
That was what they wanted. That's all they knew.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not making that a discriminatory stage. That's just all they were comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a sad situation. Don, funeral director is on call 24/7. Can you pass out cards and say, have your family member die between noon and 6 p.m.?
No, that doesn't happen.
You get a lot of calls at night, Don?
Yes. Yep. Whenever a death occurs, home, nursing home, wherever, 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, we go.
Mm-hmm. Did you realize that when you started thinking, it's a profession you wanted to do?
Yeah, I did. Being an emergency medical technician, I'd seen that already. And
sure. That
so
was a part of your...
That's what I've done my entire life.
Medical technicians. Let's go back to when you started to be a medical technician, Mr. Peasley. Were you just at what age, sir, were you?
22, 23, somewhere in that area.
And how did you become a medical technician, sir?
I took the emergency medical technician class through Lincoln College. John Cooper was the instructor. That was back in 1984 that I took that. So, and then I rode with the paramedics in Lincoln, get some more training.
By the way, speaking of paramedics, I'm going to take a second and give Dr. Gene Blom credit, and he and Ed Ulrich and a couple others for establishing our Logan County Paramedics Association before the funeral homes were on call. Mm-hmm. And there again, that was passed month to month to different funeral homes. Mm-hmm. And nobody said a thing about that. There wasn't anything wrong with that at all.
Yep.
But funeral homes had ambulances in those days.
Yeah, that ended in 1972 or 1973 when Dr. Blom had the paramedic program start in Lincoln.
And by the way, he came up with some of his own money for that start there. Logan County ought to be indebted to Gene Blom. Mm-hmm. That's a great thing we have for this.
It is. I put our medics up against anybody in the nation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you said you were an EM or a medical technician for 22 years. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
In Atlanta.
So from the time you started to that 22nd year, what advances or what changes did you see in terms of technology or maybe procedures that...
Well, the pulse oximeter, we didn't have that back when we first started. Mm-hmm. The defibrillators. It's amazing what medical technology has done here in the last 30 years. 35 years.
What was the first item you said? The what meter?
Pulse oximeter.
What is
where you put a little thing on your finger,
okay.
get your oxygen level and pulse.
Oh, okay.
You never seen one?
I have. I just didn't know the name of it. It was the little thing you put on your finger to get the oxygen pulse. But yeah,
when your oxygen gets between under 90, you need to be thinking about going to the doctor.
Okay, good to know.
In your experience, Mr. Peasley, as a funeral director and or coroner, is there any outstanding experiences that you can recall immediately that were unusual to your career?
No, not that I can think of. Everything's been pretty straightforward.
That's because we live in Logan County.
True.
Well, and I mean that seriously.
Exactly. Yeah, we're not Chicago or Springfield.
Oh, yes. I'd hate to be in a position of authority in either one of those communities.
Or Decatur. I mean, crime rate going up everywhere.
Yeah, exponentially almost.
Mm-hmm.
So is the during the course of your medical related career, I guess, in addition to technologies changed, we talked about fentanyl being an issue and drug overdoses. Have there been other causes of death and things that have changed over the years? Are there more, gun-involved shootings, or are there other types of
other communities have more shootings than we do, thankfully, but not really. Everything's about the same.
Have you? Well, this is prying into somebody else's secret, so I'm going to withdraw the question.
Okay.
I was about to ask the question if you had any unusual requests, but that's nobody's business, so we'll just withdraw that.
Okay.
As Amos Nandy used to say, I withdraws the question.
Okay.
Is there anything, like I said, I grew up watching Quincy, so I sort of have that preconceived notion of that area of medical examiner and coroner. Is there anything that sort of a stereotype or a myth that people might think a coroner does or doesn't do that isn't actually in actuality not the case?
Most people want to know, what time did mom or dad die, and they've been there for 2 or 3 days. It's like, we don't have that technology here to do that. We can guess, and with cell phone service, basically go back to when the last time somebody had contact with them and guesstimate from there. So
Sometimes science is a guess.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that.
Yep.
And in the long run, is it really important, Mr. Peasley, for somebody to know exactly what time mom or dad died? Not really. They've gone home.
Yeah.
Period.
Mm-hmm.
How about the availability of urns? Is there quite a selection to be made in the urn business?
Mm-hmm. There is.
The urn profession?
Mm-hmm. There is. There's all kinds of things that people can make into urns or have ordered. So,
with the COVID crisis, and we've heard about all the supply chain issues, did that hit your industry as well?
Yes, it did. It did. We had some caskets that I never had it, but I've been told by my sales reps that they had issues getting caskets. So we were told at one point, you need to call when you got your family and making arrangements to be sure we have it, or that the availability is there from one of their warehouses. But that seems to have been streamlined, and so.
Yeah, I wondered how you would handle that if they choose, like, maybe the top three. If this one's not available, we go with this one or this one.
Pretty much.
Call the warehouse,
I never had.
Like you said.
Maybe I had 1 or 2 that I couldn't get, but most families were understandable, with the way things were going during 2020, 2021. So,
as a funeral director, and you're working with families, it would be nice to think that everything would kind of go along on a normal basis. You ever have anybody who says, I want my dad buried tomorrow? Nothing unusual like that.
well, they can want to be buried in 24 hours, but it's not going to happen in Logan County because the cemeteries require 48 hours notice, 24 to 48 hour notice to get the grave dug.
Say, as a funeral director, let's kind of run through this business of taking a body down to, or ashes, down to Camp Butler. Tell us how that works, Mr. Peasley.
Well, first off, you have to have the honorable discharge, the DD-214, in order to be buried at a national cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
And then we fax that to a national center in St. Louis, I think Jefferson Barracks, and then we wait half hour, and then we call them and say, this is what we've got, this is what they want, what's available. I've never had a problem where we couldn't bury anybody at Camp Butler within a week or two. But you get out to Arlington National, it could take a month.
Seriously, yeah, backlog.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So somebody from Lincoln, Logan County could possibly be buried in Arlington.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've done that before.
Have you?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, logistically, that'd be a nightmare.
Yes and no. What we do is we contact a funeral home out there and have the body flown to D.C., and then the funeral home handles everything from there. So
it kind of precludes you having to worry about providing that service out there. You
Right,
have a
yeah.
contact out there.
right, because I'm not licensed. I'm only licensed in the state of Illinois. I'm not licensed in D.C. or Indiana or Missouri. So we call licensed personnel there to handle those for us.
Is it, do you have any difficulty with getting veterans records? You know, some time ago, a long time ago now, they had that big warehouse fire in St. Louis, burn up a lot of veterans records.
Yeah, there are some that don't have the DD-214, and I've never had to do that. I've never really had to dig into finding one to prove, but most people have already figured out how to get around that and have paperwork, especially if they're receiving VA benefits.
That's another thing that's involved. You have to give advice on a veterans family about the Veterans Department, because perhaps none of them had any experience with the Veterans Administration.
Yeah, every time I have a veteran death, I tell the family to get a hold of Dan Benedict at the VAC
Who does a great job for us.
here in Lincoln.
He does a really great
And
job for us.
see what other benefits they can get.
I'm trying to defer and Mr. Kirby
okay.
because I talk too
Well,
much.
I've got a question which is completely not anything we're talking about now, but in the news recently, we're going back to your EMT days, there's been talk of requirements as far as, I know the police are required to wear body cams. There's been talk and legislation proposed about EMTs being required to wear body cams. Any thoughts on that? If you think that's a good thing, not such a good thing? I mean, it's one of those unfunded mandates which seem to be coming through more
That's
and
the
more.
key thing, is unfunded. I don't know how these small departments like Atlanta, Mount Pulaski, if they're required to have that, how they can afford it.
Yeah.
Because then you got to have one for every medic. Like I was talking to a local police chief, he goes, I normally have 2 or 3 guys on, which means I can have 2 or 3, but if we have a big event where I've got others, then I got to supply them for everybody. It's nice to make these mandates, but if you don't fund them,
Right.
I mean, there was even talk. I was good at recent continuing ed in Mount Vernon last week, and there was a rumor down there that they were looking at making coroners wear cameras.
Oh, really?
Like, I don't know how our department can afford that,
Yeah.
because you got to have all that specialized equipment.
Plus you have to have the
I
storage.
just noticed, Lloyd, that the clock went up there. Our guest this morning has been Mr. Don Peasley, not only a Logan County coroner, but a gentleman who offers great solace and service to families who are bereaved, Peasley Funeral Home. So we appreciate very much your being here, Don.
Thank you for inviting me, Bill.
The preceding program is a presentation of WLCN 96.3 FM and WLCNonline.com.